Welcome everyone to a casted game of Age of Empires 4, and today spawning in the east side of the map playing in teal, we've got Feudal playing as the Japanese, and his opponent on the west side of the map playing in red. We've got Give You Anxiety playing as the ayyubids. Welcome everyone to Cliffside. That is the map for today for Age of Empires 4 as part of the new Sultan's Ascent DLC. We've got two new civilizations, the Japanese and the ayyubids. And I think it's going to be an interesting one because of the aggressive nature of both of these civilizations. They, the ayyubids, they obviously are a variant civilization of the Abbasid dynasty, but I'd say they've had a bit of the economy kind of stripped away a little bit. No fresh foodstuffs, which makes the villages cheaper that the Abbasids get, and no fertile crescent, which makes the town centers and other buildings also cheaper as well. So it does mean the ayyubids do rely on a bit more of a tempo aggression as a civilization, and you can definitely say the same about the Japanese. Now, the Japanese, I think, is fastly becoming one of my favorite civilizations, especially with the farming transitions that they get. It's incredibly smooth with the Kura storehouse landmark. It depends if we'll see it or not. The Cocker Township could be an option. I think against the ayyubids, though, you're probably tending to lean towards the Kura storehouse. Obviously, a lot of things are still being established in Age of Empires 4 with these new civilizations, so time will tell how this one plays out. But what I would say is that the reason why I'm excited about this match in particular, which is why you really should stick around for this one, is because the Japanese can be very aggressive. Probably within sort of the 11, 12, 15 minute mark, they can really come live with their eco, pumping out units very quickly. The ayyubids, very similar sort of timing. Sometimes they can go for a very fast castle, especially if they go for the culture wing and go for this here, the advancement. It makes the next age up take a significantly less period of time to get there, but also cost less resources. Not in the feudal age. I mean, it's very unlikely to go for this in the feudal age. But to the Castle Age, it can be very strong on that Castle Age timing, give you access to relics, give you access to all-important Castle Age units. Now, speaking of units, the Japanese have some absolute great ones, absolute cracking ones, some unique units, the Samurai, Honor Geisha, Honor Musha, you name it, they've got it. And I'm pretty excited to see this civilization develop through various games that we watch on the channel. Now, we do now actually see the ayyubids going up with the trade wing, the bazaar, so it's going to be able to get some very favorable trades. It's a very popular way to get to the feudal age these days. You can really trade in some, it depends on what you get and how lucky you get, but you can get some really good effective trades with this. So it's a bit of a spin the wheel sometimes, and you kind of have to ride it out and see what you get. But it does allow a lot of adaptation for the ayyubids. Now, what I would say is, guys, if you have been watching on the channel, I really want to appreciate you guys' support. I want to say that I appreciate your support, you guys. You've been absolutely fantastic, both on YouTube and on Twitch. And if you're just on YouTube, maybe check it out on Twitch if you want to watch some live streams. And if you're on Twitch, maybe if you want to see some games offline sometimes, maybe check out the YouTube. Well, there we go. There's the Kura storehouse, as we're kind of expecting. Building up with 4 villagers. Pretty standard opening here for the Japanese. Now, the Japanese, I would say, are very flexible as a civilization. Lots of builds are pretty viable with them. We do often see a second town center expansion, but very equally, we do often see just a one town center play into getting the daimyo mana, which will increase the farm harvest rate by 25%, but also give an extra villager, but also increase the HP of the town center, but also give an extra arrow slit. So I think you can play one town center and 2 town centers pretty viably with the Japanese. So it depends obviously on the civilization matchup. I would expect in this particular matchup to see just a one town center play, depending on what the ayyubids do. But GUA, Give You Anxiety, if you know him as a player, he's very aggressive, and you can see already, he's actually going to go for a fast castle here. This is a very clear telegraph of that strategy. And if Feudal, if he spots that, he scouts it out, I mean, he's surely going to want to stay on one town center, right? The stone that is being brought in, though, that will give him a really nice timing on that daimyo mana, rather. And the free farms, it really stacks quite nicely with the Kura storehouse. I think generally something probably does need to be done with the Cocker Township, because the fact that the Japanese get this upgrade anyway, the daimyo mana, it really stacks well with the fact that the storehouse gives you free farms, right? It feels almost very difficult to ignore that landmark when choosing, to get to the next stage. And the ayyubids behind this, with the Castle Age timing that they're probably going to get, you can go for various options. Camel Lancers is a very nice choice. They can even obviously get the early monastery for the dervishes out there to get those relics nice and early in case it does go into a late game. Now, to speak about this map, it can develop into a bit of a late game. I think this map is probably one of my most favorites of the new map pool. Primarily because it's quite versatile. Like, you don't often get this situation where maps can be both potentially turtley to get to the late game, but also potentially very aggressive at the same time. And the reason why I say that is because, sure, you've got some very nice walling potential. Pretty cheap palisade walls can be plugging in these gaps pretty quickly, but the trouble is doing that. It's literally all the way along the vertical plane of the map. So it can be very difficult to actually achieve all that walling up. But by the same token, if you do get it, then it can be very turtly. But if you don't, and there's a very central area to move through. It's incredible, right? You can get in through very, very quickly. And so that's the ideal part of this map. I think it's incredible. Holy smokes, a big ass raid from EGC TV. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys and all the work you've been doing with Age of Empires 4 esports. Absolutely incredible. Pretty much, I'd say, without doing a disservice to a lot of other people, keeping the top tier, S tier tournaments coming in. Guys are doing absolutely great work and amazing job with that. I really appreciate that. Well, we're going to be seeing a great game. You guys are coming at the perfect time, actually, because we've got the ayyubids versus the Japanese. I would say, the Japanese is certainly one of my most favorite civilizations. And we are going to be having a banger of a game, especially if you've seen GUA give you anxiety. Obviously both these players are very high rated and very aggressive in many ways. Now, what I would say is with a little bit of a Grand Bazaar upgrade, you got the traders coming in for GUA, or at least he's thinking about trade, right? He's going to be getting a market up and early, and we said this about this map. It can be very dynamic. So we're going to be expecting to see maybe a bit of aggression from the Japanese in sort of the 12, 13 minute mark. That's when they really start to come alive, and that could be a problem for GUA. So I think at this point, we can already see the aggression coming out, right? So we see the scout with the Bannerman, and Crackety here was actually casting today. So what I would say, Crackety here has a great build order for what I feel like the Japanese are kind of loosely following. I'm not sure if he's following it exactly, but an early Bannerman rush with an early unit coming out across. It's I think Crackety here was probably the first to really come up and codify that. So it's certainly worth checking out as well, because it's a very popular way to play as the Japanese. But with the easy walling here, it does mean the trade could pay itself back quite quickly as long as it keeps it safe and secure. I guess that's the main task for GUA at this point. We do see the Daimyo Manor now, so as the name suggests, I am a bit biased. What can I say? But you're going to get an extra 25% harvest rate speed on these farms, and I think it's incredible because one thing that is really difficult in certain transitions in Age of Empires, especially in the Feudal Age to the Castle Age, is wood. Whilst there's obviously a very big focus for collecting, you need that wood for production buildings, you need it for farms, you need it for all sorts of things. But the Japanese, they get the farms for free, and so they can play this really nice, compact, condensed economy, very difficult to raid, but also manage to pump out the extra wood they would have done on farms. So, for example, you just don't need to spend on the farms. It's 75 wood. It's quite a big saving that you get. And you can see the production buildings coming up very quickly now for the Japanese. And that means that Feudal should be able to pile on some pressure. A lot of gold coming in. That's going to be able to trade quite nicely to get traders, but also take some favorable trades considering the tech up he's got. Could actually invest in some Bedouin swordsmen if he needs to. But seeing as he's getting a decent trade, and look at this. Actually, 11 gold is not too great. He hasn't extended it. It doesn't seem. So he does have the neutral trade post there, but it seems like he's trading to the House of Wisdom for now. Oh, there we are. There's one that's extended. 86 gold. That is a nice bit of trade line going on. Hardened Samurai, an incredibly strong unit for the Japanese. It gives you the vibes of the English and the HRE with, the kind of, I guess, heavily armored units in the Feudal Age. Not many civilizations actually get that. So it does pose a unique problem for the ayyubids to deal with, but they could go for the Desert Raider, which does actually toggle between both the ranged and the melee attack. It could be an option for GUA. It has actually gone for the Bedouin Swordsman. It's one of the reasons why this tech up is so strong with the Grand Bazaar, right? He's actually going to be pumping this away and pushing this army back, even with the Bannerman in play. Bannerman does go down, but does leave the aura there for 30 seconds with the increased attack. 15% for the cavalry. Obviously, there's no actual cavalry here anymore, but the samurai going to be holding on, and it looks like GUA is going to try and push this back, mostly with spearmen for now. It's not the ideal counter. He's going to want to transition away from that if he can, because there's not that much in the way of cavalry. Now, so the farms are starting to pump out there for Feudal, but you can see he's just pumping out a lot of production buildings. And, well, resources-wise, both players looking to stay in that Feudal Age for quite some time. Neither player really getting their way to the castle. They're obviously very highly invested into this Feudal Age pressure. Samurai diving in. Now, if you are new to Age of Empires 1, the Japanese in particular, take a look here. You can see that little white part of that samurai there on the top of the blue health bar. That did just get taken away. So what's really nice about the samurai is that this one has actually got it back again. So out of combat, it regenerates. It's a shield, effectively. And the first attack that it gets, whether it's ranged or melee, it doesn't even matter how much damage that is. I mean, you could be having like the highest amount of damage you can possibly get from, say, rockets from a fully upgraded Japanese town center. It wouldn't matter. It completely debuffs it, completely takes it away. It is only one shot, though, but it does allow them to tank in and dive into town centers a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. But the concern for Feudal is with the trade up and running, trade is incredibly strong. You can see the economy unit numbers, 50 to 35. That makes things a little bit tricky because Vishunol needs to pressurize that as soon as he can. The good thing that's in his favor, he's on one town center, so he does have that capability to pump out units, which is exactly what he's doing. He does have a couple of Honor Bagesha as well, which are an incredibly fast unit on their feet and incredibly good damage output if you have a melee attack, a melee fight like we're possibly about to have. But no, the ayyubids, or the ayyubids rather, they're pushing back with the archers, just trying to keep them alive for as long as possible. Samurai going to dive in possibly onto that wood line, but he's going to have to back away. He doesn't really have the numbers. And this is where things become a little bit tricky for the Japanese, right? He's pressuring, but he's not doing critical damage, which is kind of what he needs to do. He needs to try and get on top of this trade post if he can, but the walls are coming up for GUA. And it looks like this map, we talked about it, how it can be carved into different dynamics. It could be carved into a very highly aggressive map. It could be carved into a more of a turtly defensive map. It looks like GUA is going to be trying to do the latter. The concern for GUA, though, is he is very open in the middle, right? It's very difficult to get palisade walls along the whole edge of the routes and the entrances. The middle is pretty exposed. Alright, well, Japanese going to dive in with the hardened samurai. I mean, I think this is a trouble situation for GUA because, again, the samurai is such a strong unit in the feudal age. It's very difficult to counter. You're going to need a lot of archers, and he doesn't actually have steeled arrow, which makes things even worse. And the Japanese do have iron undermesh. I really think at this point, GUA really has to focus on getting that steeled arrow because it does feel like the Japanese are leading into the samurai, and rightly so, right? He sees his opponent doesn't have steeled arrow, the extra attack, and that makes things very, very tricky. Like you can see, just so limited number of samurai, but they're getting so much value so far in this game. Well, the trade is going to be a bit exposed as well. It does have a couple of blue dots. What's going on here? We do see a couple of the hardened samurai. The trouble is, there's not enough here mass to actually take out a lot of these traders. A couple of them are weak health. But you can see he's actually continuing to pump out. Look at the production buildings. We talked about it, 12, 13 minutes. And that's exactly what Vishundol's doing. He's going to pressurize very heavily with the units. The Yumi Ashigaru are very strong units in the way that they actually change the dynamics of feudal age fights because they train so fast. I believe it's 13 seconds, but they're also incredibly cheap. 35 wood, 30 food. As a ranged unit, an archer unit, it's very cheap. A standard archer would cost about 50 wood and 30 food if my memory serves me correctly. And this is a really strong army composition. You've got the samurai tanking the front line with their little shield that they've got for the first hit that they take. And then you've got the Yumi Ashigaru. So I think GUA is under a lot of pressure. Things could get really tough for him because the pressure is mounting. The military numbers is starting to climb. And GUA, he needs more of an army here to force to defend. He has teched into a little bit of Desert Raiders coming out there, which will act as a nice front line for the archers to fight behind them. But again, Steeled Arrow is only just coming in. It feels like the effective fights can't really happen for GUA until he gets that tech. He really needs that Steeled Arrow. Appreciate all the well wishes in chat, by the way. That's very, very kind of you. Well, Vishnu trying to open up another way in to get into the base, and it's not a bad idea, right? Because he runs the risk of being walled out. Like, sending a couple of villages at the right time here for GUA could wall this up. But again, the samurai coming in with the katana bannerman. Like, when you factor in that the samurai, they're not on their own, right? They've got the katana bannerman, increased 15% damage. It gives you the vibes of, like, the meta for the Ottomans. And the reason why I think it's so strong is, you know, civilizations do tend to have this kind of bonus, this kind of mobile unit that can buff up units, although the English obviously get the network of castles with the outposts, which is significantly difficult to establish. You know, building an outpost rather than getting a unit to train to join the army, it's a lot more difficult. And they can fight themselves as well. It's actually the Yumi Bannerman, so apologies for that. It's actually the Yumi Bannerman buffering the Yumi Ashigaru, but, you know, all the same. Actually, this is the katana one, so he's got one of each. And so this army is incredibly powerful for Vishundal. He's going to dive right in, actually. I think this is a good time because he's got a nice massive units. He's got samurai, which is difficult to counter for GUA. He does have a couple of desert raiders, but the trouble with the desert raiders, they get absolutely slaughtered by the Yumi Ashigaru, fighting underneath an outpost, which is not ideal for Vishundal. But if he can tank as much as possible, you can see the outpost focusing on the Yumi Ashigaru, which makes sense because, again, the outpost is not going to do all that much damage on the samurai. The samurai are diving in. They're going to take out the spearman front line, and unfortunately, GUA doesn't have that much to defend here. He might be overrun, has a healthy economy still in terms of numbers, but that could change very quickly. And I think Vishundal probably just torches down this outpost. This is incredibly difficult to stop here for GUA. He's got to find a way to stabilize as best as he can. Now, he could actually just limit the trade to the neutral trade market and his House of Wisdom. But that's a bit tricky because this is the path that's exposed, right? So Vishundal's doing great work to actually make sure he's on the north side of this House of Wisdom to try and cut off any traders that might head through. Villagers having to retreat a little bit, and he's starting to get overrun, but don't let this fool you because this is not over yet. GUA does have the ability to defend if he can mass up enough units. He does have to get them out there, though. A couple of those samurai are losing their lives underneath the town center. A couple of villages are going to be lost on that wood line as well, so it's a bit tricky. Effectively, you have to bear in mind that the Japanese have to do this, right? Because of the amount of economy that GUA has scaled, he has to kill villagers, and he's doing that. So he's doing his job. He's doing what he needs to do. Villagers being sacrificed on the front, and they're going to fight with villagers, getting the shivs out. Oh, GUA, it's a map. Absolute slaughter on the wood line, but he does have a bit of economy numbers to play with, right? The archer numbers are starting to dwindle. The real problem is the samurai. He needs to find a way to deal with this. There's have a couple of horsemen trying to get those samurai numbers down as quickly as possible. But the Yumi Ashigaru constantly tricking in. You see the stream of teal dots heading across. We'll have to see. Well, in any case, a couple of archers are still staying alive there for the ayyubids. He's got to keep up mass, right? The good thing for GUA, he's got defender's advantage. He's got the production right there where the fight is, so he will be holding. There comes a point where the Japanese have to make a decision. He can't keep trickling in units just like this. You might have to turn back and say, okay, I've done a bit of damage. We've got to relax, we've got to recover, we've got to reset. Trouble is, once he does that, it gives GUA the ability to breathe again, right? So the trouble for the feudal age fights in this case is the ability to do critical damage to structure, infrastructure in particular. Now, what's really great for GUA is he's got his production buildings at the back of his base. This game is completely different if he has his production on the front. The reason why I say that is because there are two ways to nullify production buildings. There's one in terms of taking them out, obviously, with siege, with rams. Another one is by camping on them with your units, so that if any units do pop out, they get sniped instantaneously. The last thing that Vishundal wants GUA to do is to be able to mass up units. Speaking about massing up units, that's a lot of hardened samurai. Getting the katana bannerman, or the Yumi bannerman rather. But yeah, I mean, he's coming in with lots of units, and also the bannerman coming in to buff them up. I have to say though, GUA with a nice hold. And he's starting to put up units again. You know, his eco has been damaged a lot. 31 eco units lost, but he's still ahead. As I said that though, the Daimyo Manor has been working pretty nicely. This is kind of it's actually a Daimyo Palace now, so he's upgraded this all behind all this. So Vishundal's not all in, right? You get the idea that sometimes with pushes like this, it could be an all-in play, but actually Vishundal's been ecoing a little bit behind this. That's going to be a 50% harvest rate on this farms, and if we take a look at the food income right now, it's incredibly strong. 1,300 per minute coming in there just on those farms. And the great thing for Vishundal is he doesn't necessarily have to dive that base. What he has to do is deny the trade, and he's doing just that. It almost feels like there is still a good comeback mechanic for the ayyubids, and that is going to the castle age, which is exactly what he's doing. He's going up with the culture wing advance, but we talked about this at the beginning of the cast, right? 850 food, 450 gold. It's incredibly cheap tech up to that castle age. And what this allows him to do is to get the natural counter to what's been posing him so many problems, and that is the hardened samurai. If he gets some crossbows out, he'll be absolutely fine. That poses a bit of a problem for Shundal now, because now he's going to be out-teched. All of a sudden, a couple of horsemen diving in for GUA. I love this play because one way to distract your opponent is to try and get a counter raid, especially because of the fact that Japanese at the moment are very highly infantry based. They don't have necessarily the fast movement speed you want, although, you know, they do have the obligation, to be fair. They do get around on their feet pretty quickly. Quite a few villagers going to be diving into that town center for protection. And he's kind of camping. He's keeping a couple of villagers idle, but I don't think GUA minds this too much, right? He's still massing up behind. He's got the production in the back. He's got the camel lancers, and he's going to be running through that army pretty soon. Horsemen trying to get some value, but a good hardened number of spearmen, or samurai rather, going to be fighting that off. But this is where it becomes a bit problematic, right, for GUA, because we talked about how having the production buildings in a safe spot. Well, this is kind of no longer safe, at least for the temporary moment, because Vishundal is camping. It does allow him to get the trade back up and running, though, and that would be great for his economy. Back at home, the Japanese. Now, there is actually an option for the Japanese, obviously, to get to the castle age, but it's got a lot of stone to be able to upgrade into the shogunate castle. Now, we talked about the difference between one town center play and two town center play for the Japanese. Obviously, he's going up against, well, trade and a town center from GUA, and so that forced him to be aggressive. But what this allows the Japanese to do is really scale their economy very nicely. It's only one town center, but this shogunate castle upgrade will increase the town center in many ways. The HP, their damage output done to it, with it rather, but also increasing the villager harvest rate of farms by 75%. And it's absolutely bonkers. I think generally that would be the best farms that you get in Age of Empires 4 with that. There is a Mangonel which will be pushing away that army for the Japanese. And GUA is holding, and is going to be looking to hold pretty solid with the great economy behind it. And with the army having to back away for the Japanese, well, he's going to get to the next stage with a floating gate, which does unlock a lot of options for the Japanese. It was kind of a necessary move here because he couldn't really see out the game in the Feudal Age because of the great defense by the ayyubids, but more importantly, the trade really helped him along. But I gotta say, this Shogunate castle is incredibly strong. Now, the Japanese don't get keeps in the castle age, rather, and it makes sense when you've got this. It actually has a rocket attached to it. 81 damage coming out of it is very difficult to push. So the Japanese can be very safe and secure for at least the next 10-15 minutes. It's very difficult for the ayyubids to kill them off. But what he's got to be careful about the Japanese, now that it has teched up, we often have a saying in RTS games, when you tech up, that could be when you're most vulnerable, because it means you've invested a lot of resources to get to that next stage, but also it means because of the increased usage of those resources, you don't have much in your bank to produce units. But the crazy thing about the Japanese is his economy was so strong that even spending the resources to get to the castle age, he's still got a lot to produce with. And this is where things become a bit difficult for Feudal. We talked about the production buildings and where they're located. Well, for Feudal, they're all forward. And this means that GUA and the ayyubids can camp on it. So units coming out might actually be instantly sniped, and that becomes very difficult to replenish, right? But we can see the rocket damage coming out of the Shogunate Castle. This is not a position that GUA can stay in for very long. It does have the range coming in from the Mangonels, but again, I should say Mangonels, but I mean, it's actually the Manjanek. It's a unique unit for the ayyubids and can actually switch over to the incendiary version, which is actually amazing to look at. But again, this is actually a bit out of the radius, so these 2-3 production buildings will go down, and Feudal's production capabilities will start to be hampered. Now, what would say is that they do get the Yorishiro, which is the little kind of relic in ways from the floating gate, which can be deposited in certain buildings. It looks like he went for it on the... did he go from the town centre? No, he hasn't gone for the town centre, but if he does go for it on the town centre, it would increase the production speed by 25%. It's quite common to get it on the forge, but we'll have to keep an eye on where he's actually placed that once the action dies down, because that's what we're facing up against, right? A couple of units building up on the front lines for GUA, and it's kind of now GUA's turn to attack. Trying to get a couple of archers sneakily around the skirts of the map, on the edges of the map. And the good thing for GUA at this point, the tech up coming for Feudal a little bit later than his, does mean there's got a bit of a map position. He could actually look to get a couple of the relics, a couple of dervishes out maybe. If he can sweep up a couple of the relics off the map, it really gives him a bit of advantage on solidifying his advancement in sort of mid-map objectives. Getting some of the relics, a couple of the sacred sites, could be incredibly strong for GUA. Speaking about incredibly strong, well, these samurai have been upgraded to veteran samurai. And there aren't all that many crossbows, which I'm kind of worried about in terms of army composition, right? Because he could get overrun. Now, he does have a couple of Manjanek, which will pose a problem even for samurai. But if they can get up and close and personal, especially with a couple of Springles being built, 2 of them have been built, I still think the Japanese are looking in a good spot. One thing that does worry me for the Japanese, though, is the trade, right? 22 traders is an incredibly good way, rather, to really scale your economy in incredibly strong ways, efficient ways. And Feudal hasn't been able to pressurize that for quite some time. Alright, well, the Mangonel's going to be taking out the forge. There's nothing really there to be had. The Japanese having to turtle up a bit, so it's now Feudal's turn to try and build up as much army as he possibly can. Just take one big fight, you feel, and then push out from there. The samurai are chasing. A couple of archers were looking to get some damage for GUA, but not going to achieve all that much with the samurai chasing. But this is where things become interesting, right? We talked about the Shogunate Castle, and it's very difficult to push, and GUA knows that. So it's not like he can dive this. It's a bit different, right? We saw Feudal just charging into the ayyubids base. GUA, he can't do that. Not against the Shogunate Castle for the Japanese there. He's starting to wall up quite heavily here, GUA, trying to extend the game into the late game. And again, I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like the Japanese, they have a really strong late game, primarily because of the fact that they can produce units incredibly fast. There's always this terminology said sort of zerging their way through, and it's something they do. Where there's mass-produced units, they kind of send them to their slaughter, but they eventually just brute force their way in. Ooh, I would like to say, by the way, thank you for the subscription, by the way. I am worst case earlier on. Apologies, I missed that. But I will catch up with all the subbage after the game for sure, at least. Now, behind all this, I feel like GOA probably could afford to go to the Imperial Age, and it might not be a bad move, although it would be a bad move to do it now, because he's got a lot of aggression coming in. I mean, this could be a clean-up for Vishundal. Takes out the Manjanek, about to take out the second. That's absolutely huge. Sniping those two siege engines. Looks like GOA has been caught out of position quite significantly. Vishundal, he saved up for military, and you can see the numbers are crazy. 93 military versus 23. Vishundal will push all of this back. GOA doesn't have the strong economy that he once did. Vishundal has got a lot of production behind all of this. He's extending himself into the second town center as well. So one thing that's good about GOA's position is whilst he lost his army, which is, I guess, not very good, but he's got a great economy. But he does need to survive, right? So I like what GOA is doing. He's going to lose this fight, but he's pulling away the army from the mid-map. What GOA doesn't want is he doesn't want Vishundal to do what he's doing now, which is actually sending units to his base right here. So GOA needs to survive. He needs to get some time to let that economy make more units with it. Vishundal, he's going to get some more economy with that second town center. And we've seen this actually with the Japanese. It's never too late necessarily to get a second town center. It actually helps in this position because, oh, bit of a wallow with the Dervish. No, it doesn't happen in the end and does lose out on that relic. Now, we talked about relics in the earlier stage of the cast where we've kind of said, well, GOA had a lot of map control for some time. In that time, he has gathered 2 relics, about to get a third one in. Couldn't lose that Dervish though, I would have thought. In the middle, this is where the Japanese are getting the revenge. And a couple of horsemen. I like this play for GOA. Like, he's just distracting a lot of military units that could be on the front lines. And that's a lot of units to commit, right? And Vishundal, he recognizes it. And is going to send those units forward. This is a bit tricky for GOA. I'm not sure how he holds this one. We'll have to see. The units diving into the town center. I mean, this is tricky, right? Like, you can see how the dynamics plays in this matchup. How the ayyubids could never do this to the Japanese with that Shogunate Castle in place. Ayyubids, their town center is just not as strong. And he's going to dive right in with the veteran samurai and the Honor Geisha fighting over their shoulders. Does have a couple of crossbows, so GOA might be able to hold for a short period of time, but the trouble is, he is kind of outnumbered, 109 to 29, and this is where we get that Zerg feeling, right? Just pumping out units at this point, just going to see a constant stream of teal units across the map, and GOA, he's struggling. He does get to the Imperial Age, though. That does give him a nice tech up, but the trouble is, what can he do with it? If the units get camped on, oh, Wallow going up, I don't think he gets anything with that. But he's going to push away the army, and he needs to save that massive crossbows. Now, if this gets into elite crossbow status, that could be devastating. He's going to try to get another Wallow. Oh my god. Japanese got to get out of there. He's going to get it. He might get some samurai. Oh, he doesn't. He gets a couple, but, you know, all things considered, not too terrible. Vishundal got out there in time. But a welcomed Wallow for GOA. Production on the front line is getting camped on. And the thing is, he's getting a decent number of crossbows. Like, they're starting to mass up into dangerous status, right? There's no Mangonel here. In the south, Segsite is being denied and decapped, but this is an issue. The trade could be exposed. And if Vishundal can get on top of the trade, that could be precarious. He's killed 78 economy units. GOA has really got to stabilize that economy. He's lost 80 economy. Most of it traders, I believe. But the fact that he's still holding on in terms of numbers is kind of crazy. Does have a Mangonel and a Springle. 2 Mangonels, in fact. 3 Springles there for Vishundal. Probably looking to snipe out those Mangonels, or Manjanik, I should say. I've got to get used to saying that. But here we see some villagers going up north, just trying to relocate a lot of... I mean, the villagers are still working, right? This is a big deal. Because, like, when this kind of push happens, what Vishundal wants to do is wants to keep villagers idled. And one way to do that is to kill them. With the veteran Honor Geisha charging in. Absolutely ripping through those villagers. And GOA's economy, he's lost almost 100 villagers. Or economy units, I should say. Springle's kind of going into the death, trying to chase after the Manjanik. And he should be able to retreat out of there. But Vishundal, he was at 109 military, right? He's not anymore. It's down to 57. GOA, he might be holding this. That's kind of absurd. He's actually holding this. The crossbow is working well, right? I mean, it is a hard counter, after all, to the samurai that are being pushed in. I would love to see a couple more Honor Geisha being charged in. Because that could try and gap close against the crossbows. But the Honor Geisha absolutely murdering that trade route. Oh no, GOA is going to lose even more traders now. But in the middle of the base, he's kind of secured again. He's stabilized. Somewhat. GOA. Yep, does garrison inside in the end. But behind all this, he's going to be getting another upgrade for his second town center. Has a massive farming transition. That food economy is going to be absolutely absurd for the Japanese. 2,000 food per minute. That's what allows them to pump out units like this, right? He's kind of sent a lot of units to the slaughter here, the Japanese, but he can afford to do it, and that's what they do well in the late stages of the game. Now, don't forget that Feudal is still in the castle age. And so with every passing moment, these crossbows, they're just looking a little bit better in terms of numbers, and they're going to start taking up in terms of quality as well. There's no doubt about that. Quite a few villages going down on the farming transition. On Bageisha getting so much value. Like as a raiding unit, it's incredibly strong. Starting to mass up once again, but Jiwei is starting to stabilize once again. Has a Mangonel and Manjanek, I should say. There's a Springald coming out for Feudal. Two of them. Look to snipe that Manjanek if you can. Can't get close enough just yet. But the thing is, Jiwei needs to sort this out. This is actually really difficult for Jiwei because there's a lot of Bageisha hampering a lot of the trade. And he is down to 57 villagers. And Feudal is looking strong. He's head in villager count, economy count, and on military. And this could be the dive that wins the game. The trouble is he does have Imperial Age units he's fighting against, right? Kind of really hard, heading heavy in the castle age battles. And the trouble is he's lost a lot of units over time. That's a lot of resources that went down. And the question is whether he got enough damage out of it or not. On the back of this, Jiwei has extended his economy to 3 more town centers. That will give him the ability to boom back in the game, but he's got to survive first. On Bageisha again, just really taking a lot of their traders out. Sends a couple of crossbows, but it's not enough. Jiwei needs to send more. Alright, well, crossbows are holding firm. He's keeping the area secure with the dervish as well, healing up. These guys have a really strong mass heal ability, and I think the trouble for Feudal is he has been trickling in units for quite some time, right? Never really had enough siege. I think that was a bit of a down on his push. Like if he had a bit of siege units, a couple of rams to take out infrastructure, it would have been a lot different. And the fact that Jiwei has a lot of his production at the back, I think that's really what saved him. Obviously, a lot of other things had to played a role in that, but I think having the production built at the back was able to continue to produce units. And with this number of TCs, he should be able to boom back a little bit. This game is far from over, ladies and gents. It's going to be the Imperial Age coming in for the Japanese, a Tanegashima gunsmith, and that's going to be offering him 5 free siege units at the beginning. Maybe Ozutsu, maybe. We shall see. But I think Jiwei has an ability to hold for a bit. He has had that Imperial Age tech up, and because the Japanese go to that Imperial Age, you can't sustain both pressure and teching up at the same time, right? So Jiwei will have a bit of time to breathe. The question is whether he'll get enough air, because he is still pretty far behind in terms of economy. Look at that food income from the Japanese at the moment, almost kicking on 3,000 food. What's going to happen at this point? Most likely, the Japanese get to the Imperial Age. He's going to get the upgrades, and then he's going to just constantly produce. Just produce. And things become incredibly difficult to stop. That the flood of units that might come in pretty soon, it's going to be challenging for Jiwei to stop. And there is the Tanegashima gunsmith. He actually went for the hand cannoneer in the end, skipping the Ozutsu, which is actually an interesting choice. It's not something I would have expected. I would have expected him to go for Ozutsu because they're very nice kind of siege. We talked about in the last push how he needed some siege, and the Ozutsu could have been that siege for him in this Imperial Age push, but he actually goes with the hand cannoneers instead. Now, there's not a lot standing in between the two bases, right? And this is a fascinating thing about Cliffside. Like, whilst you do have the ability to wall up, I mean, there's a good direct route between the two bases. Alright, recognizing that the trade is still an issue, he's setting some honor Bageisha just to limit that. What's really significant, I think, though, is the gold command. The Japanese have it. There's a lot of gold in the middle, and it doesn't really feel like Jiwei has control of that, although that might change, because he does have 4 relics almost, and has quite a few spearmen and crossbowmen moving out with the Manjanek. Gold being brought in there by Feudal. I would love to see some more upgrades. He is getting it now. He's also going to get the Shogunate Castle in the second town center. So this food economy, guys, honestly, this food economy is going to be absolutely bonkers. Like, I can't even... It might even start to reach even 4,000. He's going to stop the traders, but Jiwei is aware of that, and he's going to get some outposts as well to defend. In the minimap, this is a big fight here. We do see the Manjanik deploying. Gets a heavily armored and infantry-based unit for the Japanese. Manjanik does deploy, get a good damage on that, but don't forget, The shields coming out for the samurai. They do tank against that first hit from the mangonel. 2 springles heading in as well, heading behind the gates. The ayyubids retreating for now. He takes the fight without the crossbows. The ayyubids being in the north. That's actually a really good timing for the Japanese. He recognized the crossbows were out of position, and he said, well, this is the time to go. But now the crossbows are in position. The samurai are going to try and tank in as much as they can. Does have a couple of hand cannoneers at the back line, the Japanese. But could this be too much? The Onibagesha trying to fight over the shoulders of the samurai. He's heading further forward, and the crossbows don't have a meat shield in front of them. That's the big problem here for the ayyubids. The crossbows, they're fighting against the melee units, and they're getting close and personal. That's exactly what the Japanese want to do. They're going to head into the heart of the ayyubids base. Going to be coming up with a Wallow with the dervish potentially. Going to try and push this back temporarily. But this is a problem situation. Wait, does he get it? He gets it. Wait. He just about gets out of there. Takes out 2 Onibagesha to his side. Could have been worse there for the Japanese, but he's holding. Jiwei, he is holding with the production coming in so close to home. Although there is a massive... the samurai just heading through the north part of that House of Wisdom, and maybe he's not holding. Let's have a couple of hand cannoneers. This is a bit tricky because this... Yeah, he's not holding because of the massive units coming in. Look at the teal units just trickling across the map. Down to 20 military. This could be the end of the game, ladies and gentlemen. The Japanese running right in the ayyubids base. Down in the south, hand cannon is trying to micro their best way, but they're low on numbers. And there's not a lot standing in between the farms and now the Japanese army. They may head in that direction. GUA, he held for a long time, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to hold for too much longer. This is looking to be a little bit dicey. But again, there's no siege really. He's going to be just torching things down, which is not a bad way to do it when you have these numbers advantage. But he's going to be dying on the farms. And GUA, despite having 3 town centers, I'm not sure if he will be able to boom back from this position. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. GUA taps out. The Japanese run right on cliffside. He zerged his way through. He pushed his way through. He spammed his way through. And he takes the game. Hope you guys enjoyed this casted game. If you're watching on YouTube, do feel free to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you're watching on Twitch, let's keep going.